Welcome to the Dwayne Kerrigan Podcast, and I'm your host, Dwayne Kerrigan. With 35 years in business and close to 30 ventures across 12 industries, I've seen a lot. Amid the celebrity allure of entrepreneurship, many exceptional entrepreneurs remain shadowed. Here, I team up with these hidden talents to unveil their challenges and successes. Dive in with me to unearth entrepreneurial gems, learn from our experiences, and get educated. We're live, and I have Rich Diviney back on the podcast. Good friend. Love this guy. Love what he stands for. Ex-Navy SEAL. Rich, thank you for your service to this country in America, where I am right now in Florida, but also to your northern partners of Canada.
Who are still our friends, by the way. We still love Canada, just so you know.
Oh my God, I get so many phone calls. What's it like down there? What do you mean? What's it like? It's like normal.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh man, it's such a hoot. But honestly, thank you for your service. It's amazing what your commitment has given. And you know what? Honestly, thank you for your service, for what you're doing beyond the military and helping people in business and with your time and your speaking and the books that you've written. Unbelievable, bro. Like I saw the title come out and I'm like, oh shit. Tennille and I are together 24 hours a day, basically. And I'm like, holy shit, Rich has another book. And then I looked at the title and I'm like, I don't know what's in that book, but we got to get him on the show. And I read it this weekend. I was just saying to Heather that, my entire leadership team's getting a copy of this. Our management teams, I'll be ordering, a couple of dozen of them, if not probably 3 dozen of them. Honestly, I probably have highlighted 70% of the pages. To me, it was a handbook.
Good.
That was, and so I don't know if that was your outcome, but
it was. Yeah,
it was. To me, when I read the title, and then I'll flip it over to you and what's new and what you're doing and all that kind of stuff. But when I read the title, Masters of Uncertainty, and I think, if somebody were to say to me, what's the number one roadblock with people in business or people in their lives, period. But, stick to it's a business podcast, allegedly. What is and I say allegedly because we talk about so many other things, but if people go, what's the number one holdback in your opinion? With people moving towards, what they desire most. And I would probably say it's the need for certainty or the inability to handle uncertainty. And so that was what excited me about the book, which anyways, what's new with you, bro?
Well, listen, we already have a lot to unpack. So let's just start unpacking. First of all, I want to thank you for your kind comments. I think about service, not only the military service, but I think, one of the issues that a lot of military folks sometimes have with former military folks writing books and giving talks and things like that is they say, well, you're profiting on the brand, you're selling out and things like that. And certainly it's probably a small percentage of people who say that. However, what I don't think those folks realize is that for many of us, other than if it's just war stories and things like that, for many of us who do this, it's another way to serve. By getting some of these lessons out and experiences out to others so that they may learn and grow from them. And so the fact that you say that, and then the fact that you really are able to learn and grow from the works is the ultimate compliment. So things have been great. I mean, we've been busy. Our attributes company is doing well. We're hitting more and more people, serving more and more people. Obviously, as you know, you read the Masters of Uncertainty book. It involves attributes. It's one of the key factors in understanding one's ability to step into the unknown. So that's going great. In terms of the book, man, this is the book I've always wanted to write. I mean, what's interesting is this is stuff I've been thinking about for years and years and years. Even when you and I first met, which it blows my mind. We've known each other, I think, for 15 years now. So that's incredible. But I've always been interested in how and why people can step into uncertainty, challenge, and stress. I was obviously in an environment where we had to do it habitually, and that's what I've always been interested in deconstructing. The Attributes book was actually a really positive way to start. A little bit of unconscious genius there, because the attributes piece of this is so big in terms of the assessments and understanding the concepts, that I'm very grateful that I wrote that book first and built a nice foundation so that this one could come out. But But this was very deliberately written by me in a shorter format. It's less than half the length of the attributes. And there's a couple of reasons. First of all, I know, because I'm someone who does this too, it's difficult for people to read a full nonfiction book from start to finish. It just is. And so even though I'm very proud of the attributes, it's a long book. I admit that it's 200 plus pages. And so I knew writing it a little bit shorter, a little bit more punchy was gonna be and kind of the smaller format, so people could actually take it on an airplane and or shove it in a pocket. That was a just deliberate decision. And then writing it in a kind of a guidebook, handbook way. In other words, here's some concepts, here's some things to think about, here's some tools to take away. That was very deliberate. So yeah, thanks for noting that too, because that was I'm glad that's working out for people. And I get from people all the time, hey, I love the book, I read it cover to cover. That's a great compliment, because even though I have people say, hey, I love the attributes, I don't get I read it cover to cover. So they may have stopped along the way, which is fine. I get it, but it's
well,
good.
not only did I read it cover to cover, I highlighted 70% of the pages. I think I mentioned that. But for those of you who don't know Rich and you didn't catch his first interview with us because it was almost 2 years ago, I bet. Rich is an ex-Navy SEAL, and 11 deployments over 20-year course of being in the military. You created their mind gym. And I can let you describe that, to explain that. I'm kind of going off the top of my head here. And then you were involved in the assessments, which got you prepared to, I think, write that book, The Attributes. He's also the author, 2022, was it?
2021, it came out, yeah.
2021, okay. Of The Attributes, the book, The Attributes, which, I'm a huge fan of as well. Really, really amazing book. And actually reading the new book, it made me realize, we've got a new project down here in Florida. And so I need to probably utilize your attributes assessment. And we can talk about that today again, because it'll be useful for people. But if you don't know about Rich, there's also another interview that we did. If you go back in the history of our or just Google, or not Google, but search on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, that you just be able to find it. So anyways, dude, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
How's Kristen? How are the boys? What's going on?
They're doing great. Kristen's great. I mean, obviously, one of the best parts about this whole thing is we get to build this business together. After 21 years in the Navy, when the Navy kept on telling me where I had to go and Kristen had to stay home, it's nice for us to be able to do this together. And now she tells me where I have to go, which is much more healthy for a relationship. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way it's supposed to be.
That's right. Yeah. She's the CEO. I always say she's the CEO of the attributes. She's been the CEO the whole time, but of my life. But now she is the official CEO of the attributes. So it's wonderful to do that. The boys are doing great. My eldest is off to UVA to study neuroscience, and and my youngest is going to be finishing high school next year. So yeah, we're just having fun together.
Yeah. Did he just complete his first year in neuroscience?
He completed his first 2 years of core classes. There's a really cool program here in Virginia that they say if you are willing to do your core classes at a community college, then they will give you automatic acceptance into any Virginia university. And so my son, the brilliant kid that he is, said, hey, Dad, if I do this, then I can knock out these core classes, stay home. It's literally a tenth of the cost. And so he just knocked out his core classes. So he's done his first 2 years of core stuff, and he'll head to UVA to start his neuroscience stuff. So,
oh, dude, that's so awesome. I remember you explaining that to us when we talked personally online with you and Kristen, and so excited for that. And,
yeah. So,
and we're still committed to getting up to see you guys. But we'll talk about that offline.
Well, yeah, and vice versa. We get down to see you too. So
yeah. Or get up to Canada if you.
Yeah, that's another option.
We're going back in August. So.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. You're still letting us in. Then you're still letting us in as a country.
I don't know if I'm going to get let back in.
Sorry, you're tainted.
Oh, it's funny. Anyways, it's to me, it's all politicized, and of course the media blows it up.
Sure,
and you've probably lived with that in your entire life, especially in the military.
Yeah, so, humans. At the end of the day, we're just humans, and I always say this actually when I give these. We have the new Masters of Uncertainty workshop, and I actually begin it by telling people it's a beautiful world, and just remember that, because I've been to some areas that most would consider horrible and combat zones and things like that, and even in those areas, the large majority of people that all they want to do is take care of themselves, take care of their families, do right by their community. They're good people. Now there's obviously assholes who are bent on ruining that, but and that's really one of the reasons why we did the work we did. But yeah, I think 99% of people out there, they're good people. They would just want to do right by themselves and their community. So I'm very optimistic.
It's funny that you say that, and I mean, we're just kind of riffing here, but I was in Israel. This would be just pre-COVID, and I had to go do some work in over in Hebron and that area, that whole region, and so I got sent in as a lead guy, and I had to create some relationships, not knowing anybody. I basically got dropped off in a old beat up truck, and off I go. And that, I think what you just said there, that statement is something that is often forgotten. And people have asked me, like, well, how did you do that? Like, you don't even speak the language. And I said, well, one of the common bonds that we all have is we want a future that's better for our children than what we have. And if you start with commonality, and I however you want to take this statement, everybody in this conversation, but it's like, if you start with commonality, if there's conflict with your people, with your staff, and the exaggerated version of being overseas in hostile environments, if you start with what you have in common with people, rather than try to fix what you have that's opposing you, is kind of always the better place to start. So
yeah. And I would say, actually, it's funny. I have a story. I was in Iraq, and I'll keep it unclassed, but we hit this target one night, and when we hit it, the guys started going through it, and the guys can in some cases be more bull in China shop type stuff, but we realized shortly into the target that this was the wrong target. We were completely on the wrong target. So I went outside, and of course we had the family members, all the people who lived in the house. They were outside in a safe area, and I walked up to the gentleman who owned the house, and we realized, by the way, this was a doctor's office. He actually treated people, and I went over to him, and I always on these operations would carry money with me, because if we did, in the case, hit the wrong target, we'd want to pay for the door, maybe that we blew off the hinges, and to give them some stuff to apologize and to keep up relations. And I talked to him. I said, hey, I want to give you some money. He said, no, I don't. You're fine. We love you. We love you, Americans. We're so glad you're here. We're great for what you're doing. Don't worry about it. We're good. And I was like, listen, I have to insist, because it's like, okay, but can you stay? Can you have some tea with me? Let's have tea together. And I'll tell you, Dwayne, all I wanted to do in that moment was stay with him and have tea and just get to know this human. I couldn't. We had to get off target. We had to go do other things. But it was just such a reminder that people are good, and people are, and there are some bad actors out there to be sure. But for the most part, if we start with some good intentions, like you said, and commonalities, most of the time, I believe we're gonna find ourselves in a better place. So.
No, couldn't agree more. And I think if you break that down to the business level, it's don't let the few employees that either do something, they steal from you, or they don't show up or whatever. That's not all employees. The 90 whatever percent of employees wake up in the morning, put their feet on the bed, and say, I want to do a good job today.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's our job as leaders to figure out what got in the way, if there is something that happens, and how do we coach them? How do we lead them? How do we help understand and empathize and help influence them? And at the end of the day, you can't influence if you don't know it's influencing.
Well, and especially as leaders, not only all of that, but also create the environment inside of which they can do it. One of our primary jobs as leaders is to create environments. That, in fact, I would say that's our primary job, is to create an environment inside of which your team can excel and grow and develop and quite literally begin to outrun you. I remember I used to tell my junior officers, hey, you guys got to get used to accepting what I call the irony of leadership. And that is, if you do your job correctly, you work yourself out of a job, because you create a team that can run without you, and in many cases outrun you. And if you've done that, then every leader should be proud of that. Every true leader, that's their goal. And they feel proud when that happens, because they contributed to doing that. And they'll be looked at as leaders for forever, because the people see that and they feel that. And so it's our job to create these environments.
Do you, well, now that you mentioned that up, like how, I mean, I'm curious, I'm very actually curious just personally, how are things going with your business? So as a lead into that kind of like, how are you in your own business creating those environments? How have you, what tools have you used in the past? What are you finding that you can transition really efficiently from the military into your business even?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's for me, it's a little bit different. Our team is very small still. We haven't we're basically four of us, and in doing so, and of course, Kristen's the CEO, so she's the person in charge holistically. You know, we you and I know there's a difference between being in charge and being a leader. But we no doubt, there's no doubt Kristen's a leader as well. We choose her as that, but I think it's the interesting thing is that there's not much difference, if any, between leadership in the military and leadership in any other genre. And the reason is because the commonality with every single position of leadership, there's one common factor with every position of leadership, and that's human beings. Because you can't lead machines, you don't lead machines, you don't lead processes, you don't lead things. You're always leading human beings, and human beings always respond to people who care about them, who take their best, have their best interests in mind, who build trust, who build compassion, who build these environments of performance. And so it's really all about that and doing that, and it's all about being cognizant and being very aware of how things are going, because if you're not providing or giving the opportunity to provide feedback to yourself and have your teammates provide that, then you are going to be at a loss as to what people are really feeling and thinking. And so maintaining relationships so that we are completely aware of each other, and hey, are our needs being met? Are we doing what inspires us? If it was a bad week or it's a bad month, why is that? And is it because, hey, sometimes we just have bad weeks and that's natural, or is it something that we can in fact change and make better? So I think those types of conversations have to be predominant and frequent in any environment, and we're trying to do that. And as we do that, the business itself, I mean, our biggest thing right now is how do we scale the business in a way that doesn't require, for example, my physical presence. You know, right now most of it is me going out and doing the thing, which is great, you know, and it's a nice problem to have. But you can't, there's two concerns there. A, I'll eventually burn out. And B, you want to create a business model that affects and helps as many people as possible. And you can't scale one human being. So how do you create an environment? How do you create a business that can get these things to every person possible? And one of the things I loved, I know you, because we've run in the same circles. You're aware of Singularity University and Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil. And I remember I went there. This was years ago, actually, right around the time you and I met. I went up to their headquarters there at Moffett Field and spent a day just listening to some lectures and things like that. And I remember Peter, at one point when he was talking to us, he said, listen, the goal for us, one of our goals is we want to help people make $1 billion by helping 1 billion people. And as soon as he said that, it's like, that's exactly what I want to do. And you're balancing. There's always a financial piece to this, because all of us want to have financial security, but you want to do it in a way that helps as many people as possible. I love that concept. And so that's the goal, and that's going to take work. It's going to take effort, but it's a great challenge to have. So
when you talk about scale, I'm curious what your thoughts are on, and experiences, in terms of the military. But one of the things that I've found difficult is, scaling the model, the leadership model, the training, the how you treat people, how you do it, if you will, or how it can be done. The optionality in leadership, the positives and the negatives, the upsides and the downsides. Like, how do you scale that down 2 or 3 levels? Like, I'm curious on your experience with that and your thoughts around it.
Yeah, I think I'm still learning, so I have some thoughts, but I'm still learning about that and what the best way to do it for us. Our quote product is less. It's less unique than people think. And the reason why I say that is not because it makes it bad. It's actually because it makes it better because of the simplicity of it. And so what we're endeavoring to do is help teach people what we call a language of performance. And what that means is we help them understand, words, definitions. We help them understand attributes in a way that allows them to reflect on their own performance, teach them and encourage them what we call habits of introspection. How can I look at myself? How can I look at myself and have my teammates look at themselves, and then be transparent about that? And so all this to say, our goal is to begin to make that process easier. And luckily, it's not going to require too much heavy kind of masterclass style stuff to keep the quality level. So in other words, we've already started training some other people. We're looking at a process of training others to do this stuff. And really, it's about, hey, let's help them understand this stuff to the extent that they can help others understand it. And especially when it comes to attributes, it's very basic, simple stuff. It's one of the reasons why we love it. It's one of the reasons why we are worldwide right now, because the language we use, and you and I both have taken probably almost every personality assessment out there. I know you love them as much as I do. I think there's some that are better than others. Most of them are pretty good. Yeah. But I think one of the things that allows us to stand out and be unique is, A, we don't compete with any of them, because when you get your attribute assessment, you understand you at your most raw. And what we have to understand about our own performance is our performance is being influenced by some things. What I'll do is I'll throw up a slide of an iceberg, and I'll have that, I'll say that portion of ice that's above the waterline, right, which we know is just the smallest portion of the iceberg. Say that's your behavior, that's your performance. That's all anybody else sees. However, that's being influenced by a bunch of stuff that's under the waterline. The first level, the first kind of depth is your personality. And personality certainly influences performance, but personality is a combination of a lot of things. It could be beliefs and values and ideology and environment. All that stuff combines to create personality. Underneath even personality, the very bottom level of that iceberg are our attributes. In other words, that's what's running at our most raw. And the reason is because when the shit hits the fan, personality goes out the window. And Kristen and I joke about this. You know Kristen, so you'll agree with this. But anybody who, just for the audience, Kristen is one of the most kind, bubbly, compassionate, nice people you'll ever meet. When the shit hits the fan, that all goes out the window. She is running on attributes, right? As we all are. And so part of what we love is this content buttresses any other personality test you might take. It says, because the personality test will tell you how you are in kind of everyday life. The attributes will tell you how you are at your most raw. The second thing we love is that, and it speaks to the simplicity, is the simplicity of the language. I mean, attributes, these terms, people know what adaptability is. People know what resilience is. People know what situation awareness is. And so with most personality tests, you get, a couple colors, you get some letters, you get a couple numbers. With this, and honestly, if you're not exposed to that particular test, you can't talk about it with someone who's not exposed to that test. And even if you haven't exposed yourself in a little while, you can't talk. You have to relook at what an INTJ means, or a blue, yellow, or whatever. So attributes, you don't have to do that. You can have conversations around this with anybody, because it's basic human language. It's basic human performance. And so our ideas, and the reason why it's scaling in a very nice way, is because this translates. When we go to the South Africa, when we go to Europe, when we go to Asia, when we do all these countries, they can translate these terms in their language, because it's just simple terms, and we don't have to worry about getting all the combos right. So that level of simplicity is very helpful for us in terms of the ability to scale with quality, and that's what we're excited about.
Yeah. So I know that in the original book, there was 25 attributes. That might not be the exact number, but I'm going.
No, you're right. Yeah, that was. Okay. Yeah.
So it's 25, but there's 41 in total. So does the profile, because it's been a while since I've done the profile, and I will say the profile is amazing. So if anybody is listening to this and is looking for, a tool to be able to really understand where your people show up. Is that the best way to say that?
Yeah. Where and how your people show up. Yeah.
So, where and how. And so attributes, and actually you might as well just, what's the website for that?
Yeah, the website is theattributes.com. Although what we'll do is we'll give you a coupon code for your listeners. And so they can type in that code. They can get a discount on the assessment if they're interested in taking it, so they can check it out. But so when I wrote the book, I knew there was more than 25 attributes. You can't pitch a 900-page book to a publisher. They're not going to, they don't want to book that long. So I focused on the 25 quite deliberately, just knowing there'd be more. And then after the book came out, we began to explore what more looked like and began to put some of these qualities through the ringer, the kind of the metric and the guide to see if they were in fact attributes. And those metrics are quite easy. First, it's is it can you teach it or can it be taught? If the answer is yes, it's probably a skill. If the answer is no, it's probably an attribute. Can you see it? What might it show up in very small children? Okay, if the answer is yes, it's probably an attribute. And is it elemental? Like this is the baseline. So in other words, some people ask me, is self-awareness an attribute? And in fact, it's not, because self-awareness is a combination of a couple attributes. That would be humility, for example, and curiosity, combined create the self-aware person. So is it at that elemental? And so we put a bunch of these qualities through the rigor, and ultimately came up with a list of 41. It was, it wavered between 36, 45, and it kind of went down to 41. And right now we're very comfortable with our list of 41. I'm always open-minded to see if there's others that show up. And if they do, we'll add them to the list. Or if we come to a point where, like, what, this might not be an attribute, then we'll pull it off the list. But right now, having gone through this for the last few years and having had thousands of people take it, the list of 41 seems pretty good, and it brings a nice holistic. So now there's 41 attributes in 9 categories, where in the book I just talked about 25 attributes and 5 categories. So
right, yeah. So I can't recommend listeners, if you're looking for a tool, this is an amazing tool, and you should at least take a look at it at minimum. And we talk about it at length in our first interview.
Yeah,
so also go back and listen to that interview. And what else is happening with business? What's the biggest struggle you're having right now with scale? And not even necessarily, I'm going to actually ask the question in 2 ways. What's the biggest psychological problem that you're dealing with, that you've identified when it comes to scale? And then what's the most pragmatic or executionable kind of roadblock that you're having currently?
Yeah, the psychological is not too many roadblocks there, because I really feel confident that we can scale. So there's real optimism in all of us as a team that this is going to happen. It has to happen. So and we can do it. We know that. So psychological, and I'm also not too worried about the quality piece, because I know we'll get that right. I think the other pieces come with how do we position ourselves and begin to build the company in certain aspects that allow us to scale responsibly. So exploring different avenues inside of which to focus. So you can't. I love the old Russian proverb. There's an old Russian proverb that says, "If you chase 2 rabbits, both will escape." Right, and so you have to pick the rabbit to chase, and sometimes you pick the wrong rabbit. So you have to pull back, say, "Oh, that wasn't the right rabbit." And so. Right. So I think the challenge is figuring out which rabbit to chase, and building on that, and doing things quite methodically. I guess psychologically, if I were to take back my original answer, psychologically it would be patience, because you want to have it happen fast. You want this to get out there, and you want this to be a big thing. But you can easily, any of us who know how to delay gratification can get over that pretty quickly. But things just take slow. They take longer. That's one big difference between my old life and this new life, is that in the SEAL teams, especially at SEAL Team 6, it's just things went fast. People moved quickly. It was just that it was the way we did business. Obviously, a lot of times it was time sensitive, but people just did stuff, and shit got done way faster. And maybe it was also because it might have been more straightforward in that life. Here in the civilian world, things don't move as fast. People don't move as fast. Processes don't move as fast. Life doesn't move as fast, and so that's probably another psychological aspect that I've had to get used to. So,
yeah, I feel that every single day. It's like,
yeah.
Whether it's banks, lawyers, accountants, just customer, like this. It's like I think every job. My team always says, like, Dwayne thinks every job takes 10 to 20 minutes and we should be done. So it's definitely a pain. I'm glad you talked about patience, because I was going to go back and say, like, there's got to be some type of thing that's affecting you. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But and while you brought it up, I'm just going to ask you, like, how did you cope with it? Because I see you, like, your big shift, and obviously, I know a couple other SEAL team members, and I've seen their shift. It's like there's a transition.
Yeah.
And not like unlike there would be a transition if you came from the medical history or industry and you got into the automotive industry.
Sure.
There would be
Yeah.
a shift in culture and a shift in thinking, a shift in time and budget, and like you get into the pharmaceutical industry. And I was talking to a buddy of mine who used to do turnarounds, and he said they would get pharmaceutical companies. Somehow they got into this niche, but they would literally get given to them products that were making 10, 20 million dollars. And I was like, oh, what would you have to pay for those to buy them? He's like, no, they just gave them to us for free.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Like the budget number in a pharmaceutical firm is just it's astronomical.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
There's no other industry, almost no other industry that really looks at, investment at like the pharmaceutical industry does. Anyways, I'm curious, back to the question is like, with you in the patient's piece, what was that process for you like to get over? What did you have to really kind of identify? And so I'm hoping that listeners will be able to, because patience is a problem with a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it is.
They have a vision, they have an idea, they want it to happen. And the time and distance between it being in their brain and it actually happening can create a tremendous amount of frustration.
Yeah. Well, I would attack that in a couple different ways. First of all, I'll attack it from the potential entrepreneur who finds themselves low on patience. We get a lot of people low on patience on the assessment, especially in the entrepreneurial space. But I would just say, the very obvious thing for me, for these folks to lean on their other attributes. Even though entrepreneurs are largely impatient, entrepreneurs also have an ability to delay gratification. They have ability they know they know hard work is required. In fact, they're addicted in many cases to the hard work of building a business or creating something new. And so I think just a recognition of, hey, you've done this before, you've been down that road, you know what this looks like, allows for entrepreneurs to execute patience when they need to, but also lean on their impatience. Like we say in any of our attributes, your top 5, bottom 5 attributes, when you look at those, when you take our assessment, your bottom 5 attributes, it doesn't equal your weaknesses. It's not strengths and weaknesses. In fact, your success as a human being is as much because of your bottom 5 as it is your top 5. So your impatience has gotten you somewhere. It's been advantageous to you in many aspects. The flip side, which we encourage people to do with the assessment, is also look at, okay, if that's the case, also say, okay, what are some blind spots I have to be aware of if this is one of my bottom 5? If I am impatient, what are some blind spots I have to be aware of? And a couple of very obvious ones is, first of all, you might be moving too fast, okay? You might have to slow down. You may have to lean on people in your team who are more patient so that they force you to slow down because you might be moving too quickly. And the other obvious one is a lot of times our blind spots with our attributes have to do with being frustrated with someone who is low on an attribute that we're high on. So I guess in the inverse, the patient person gets frustrated with the impatient person. They call them impulsive. That person's impulsive. They don't think enough. They move too fast. The impatient person gets frustrated with the patient person, calls that person lazy. They procrastinate, all that stuff. And one of the beauties of the attributes assessment and kind of looking at attributes from a performance factor is that it eliminates judgment, because judgment, by the way, is it's the glue that binds up the wheels of team performance. It really is. So once people see their assessments and they start to see where they sit, they start to become appreciative of those who are opposite them. A great example, Dwayne, is Kristen and I. Kristen is impatient and I'm patient. And that's worked beautifully for us in our 24-year marriage, because when patience is required, I step up and take lead. When impatience is required, she steps up and takes lead. So her impatience has prevented me sometimes from procrastinating or taking too long on something. My patience has prevented her sometimes from making the decision too quickly or being rash, right? So instead of judging, now we start balancing. And I think every entrepreneur can appreciate that when they put together a team, they're effectively putting together a group, a set of qualities that kind of bind and zipper together like a jacket, and they can begin to really accelerate that way. So So I think that's one in terms of the entrepreneur. Um, in terms of the transition, that's a whole different story. But I think the the primary way to think about our transitions, there's a couple, but one of the primary ways is it gets into the identity piece. And the identity piece is one of the chapters in the book, as you know. Identity is a very, very powerful driver in all of our behavior. Whatever we put after the words "I am," I think I think I am are the two most powerful words in the human language, because whatever we put after those two words is how we identify, and in turn how we behave. What we have to recognize about ourselves is that we're all a collection of I ams. We collect I ams as we go through life, and they can be everything from benign to very powerful I ams. It could be, I went to this high school, I play lacrosse, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a Navy SEAL, I'm a Metallica fan. Whatever those, I'm a motorcycle enthusiast, right? Whatever those I ams are, we have to recognize they drive our behavior, because every single one of those identities comes with it some behaviors and rules and contexts that define what it means to be that identity, and whether we like it or not. I'm a Purdue grad, right? Which means I hate Notre Dame. Okay. That's just part of the, that's part of the I am state. That's part of the behavior. Okay. Where this matters is that if we're not cognizant of these identities, then we find ourselves either at a loss when one of them goes away, especially a powerful one, or B, acting in ways that we don't understand in uncertainty, challenge, and stress, because we'll always prioritize the identity we'll behave towards the identity we prioritize in that moment. And it's important to be deliberate. So in that context, one of the examples, this is why you hear stories of the sports fan beating the crap out of the other sports fan, okay? And then they're in front of the judge later on. The judge is like, "Hey, why did you do that?" Like, I didn't know what I was doing, right? It's because that sports fan was behaving towards an identity without knowing it. So understanding these behaviors matters, but also understanding that allows us to start to understand our very powerful identities, ones we can lean upon. So the example is when I was in the SEAL teams, I had two very powerful identities. Okay. I had Navy SEAL. I also had husband, father. And I would even say husband and father was always more powerful. Sometimes the Navy was like, nope, your Navy SEAL needs to prioritize. Right. And that's okay. But when I lost the Navy SEAL identity, which we do, okay, Navy SEALs aren't like the Marines. The Marines are once a Marine, always a Marine. Okay. That's not how the SEALs work. We are earn your trident every day. And as soon as you put your trident away, you're no longer a Navy SEAL. You're a former Navy SEAL, but you're no longer a Navy SEAL. That can be an incredible dearth for most people. And even me, I felt the vacuum, but I immediately had my husband, father identity to lean on. I had that. I was like, I'm good. I'm cool. I'm safe. That's the most important thing to me anyway. That allowed me to come at my transition with an open mind, with safety and comfort, with pride. And then more importantly, it allowed me to choose a new identity to build. So for me, it was author and entrepreneur, and I'm currently building those identities. And so in transition, what we have to recognize is what identity might we be leaving behind, and then what identity do we want to build, and what identity can we lean on when we have that vacuum. This type of self-awareness is incredibly powerful for anybody, especially during uncertainty, challenge, and stress, because you can then begin to manipulate which identity you're going to push forward. In certain situations, when I was overseas in combat, my Navy SEAL identity was the forward identity. When I'm home, it's the husband and father. I wouldn't recommend anybody lead with their Navy SEAL identity at home. It doesn't work out very well. So
Right.
yeah, but this cognizance allows for us to really precisely choose. My Metallica fan identity comes forth when I'm at a Metallica concert. Okay. That sports fan who's going to beat the crap out of the other sports fan can say, you know what? My sports fan identity is predominant, is here, it feels like it's priority right now. But you know what? I'm going to prioritize my professional identity. I'm a business professional, and I'm a husband, I'm a father identity, so that I don't fall into the sports fan identity, silly stuff, right? So we can actually use this to our advantages. And then the final piece I'll say on this, in terms of the power of I am, and I know you've looked into, you've heard some of this research before, but there's the disorder DID, dissociative identity disorder, which is also known, or used to be known, as multiple personality disorder. There's some credible research that's been done around multiple personality disorder, or DID. And some of it you can find some pretty wacky stuff, but there's some codified, like, no kidding research of researchers taking someone who had like 10 personalities, and in one personality they're diabetic, and as soon as they switch to another personality they don't need insulin anymore, they're not diabetic. Or in one personality they know a language, and another personality they don't know a language. One personality they have an allergy and might have hives. The other personality, as soon as they shift, all right, those hives disappear, they don't have the allergy anymore. I mean, the power of our brains to 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 change even our physiology when we truly believe in these identities is remarkable. And so I think that's part of the secret to transition.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Like identities, I feel I've dove into those a lot. Like I probably spent, I mean, I 8, you know, identities that I've created, formed, and fashioned in one way or another. Uh, and I've had to retire. You know, I retired the one identity that really ran me for many years, and there was a lot of good things from that identity, but it caused a lot of pain and heartache to me and to people around me. And so there, you know, there's no question. I'm in complete alignment. You know, the most powerful force in the human psyche is to remain congruent with how we identify ourselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it is so powerful. And I'm so glad you brought it up. And you actually brought up earlier, it's, you know, in those times of, you actually wrote it in your book. I think it was like, I don't know, page 2 or something. I'm actually going to read it. It said, uncertainty is everywhere all the time, and success is about being able to optimally perform in it. And I think being able to optimally perform in it also has to do with how you identify yourself in these times of situations, so that you can question yourself and say, you know, when uncertainty arises, and you know, this is, I think, when you find, you know, you slide into another identity, and that's when you see yourself, you know, snapping at your kids or snapping at your wife when you don't really intend to, and it's not what you mean at all, but you're in a different place, whether it's your business identity or your competitive identity or sports identity or whatever that might be. And so and then those come from judgment too. So, and I mean, you really addressed it eloquently in the book. I think, you know, I mean, I can't tell you, when I saw the title of your book, I was like, oh my God, this is exactly.
I've had that title for a long time. That was, in fact, I came up with it when I was doing my work with Andrew Huberman, and a lot of the stuff we developed together. That was the title, and I proposed. We're like, hey, let's do something around here. And now eventually we didn't do that book because he had his solo book and I did the attributes. But I've had that swimming around for quite a long time, and love the reaction of people, because people are like, whoa, that's actually pretty badass to think about it that way. So,
do you mind just framing the book out for people? Like, I think it's worth a conversation. I often think people don't really understand how much they move away from uncertainty because they're ill-equipped to deal with it, and how much they're driven towards certainty. So, as I said at the beginning, I think it's one of people's biggest holdbacks. So I'd love to frame out the book in any way that you want to here.
Yeah, well, I think ultimately, so first of all, the idea behind the book is that mastering uncertainty allows for us as human beings to achieve what I consider true confidence. Because I think I consider true confidence the ability to look at one's life and say to themselves, you know what, I'm going to move down my path in whatever capacity, and I know that things are going to happen that I can't plan for, but when it does, I'll be fine. I have the tools. I'm equipped to be able to do that. So that allows for a true confidence. Now, that confidence shows up in 2 different ways. First, it shows up in your ability to, in fact, deftly move through uncertainty that hits you without warning, which is quite often. I mean, that's why it's uncertainty. Okay, so that's very advantageous. Something happens and I can move through it. I think more important and more powerful is that it also then allows you to deliberately step into uncertainty and into discomfort, because we all know this is where the growth happens. You know, our evolution as a species has been dependent on human beings stepping outside their comfort zone. This is why we've gone from cave dweller to space explorer. And our growth, our evolution, our discovery, our potential is found outside our comfort zone. And so in doing and understanding this and understanding these tools and kind of habitualizing this, one gets to the point where they now take deliberate steps. They say, I want to try this thing. I'm going to stop procrastinating on this. So that's the drive, that's the juice of the endeavor. Now, when it comes to the book and kind of summarizing how I put it together, we have to first start with the neurology and the neuroscience of this. This is where Andrew Huberman, I'm sure most of your listeners know who Andrew Huberman is. He has a very popular podcast now. He and I were friends way before the podcast, and I met him at this kind of event where we were kind of planning this executive team thing. And he at the time was running a fear lab at Stanford. He's a professor at Stanford, and in his lab he put people in a VR headset. He'd attach sensors everywhere, put them in a VR headset, and he could basically call up in virtual reality the flavor of choice for their fear. He was studying fear. So it could be like diving with great white sharks. You could have great white sharks around you. It could be going to the top of 2 buildings and walking across a platform for those of us who are afraid of heights. It could be getting attacked by spiders, whatever it is. And then he'd measure the brain as that happened. So he had this neuroscience that I was fascinated with. And of course, he was fascinated with how guys like us step through this on a daily basis, when in doing the job we did. So we've immediately meshed on this stuff. And as we began to discover, to kind of talk about this and really put it together, we discovered that fear is in fact a combination of 2 factors. Fear is a combination of uncertainty plus anxiety. Okay. Now that means you can have one or the other. You can have one without the other. You don't necessarily have fear. You can be anxious without being uncertain. That's, I have to give a presentation next week. I know the presentation. I know the people I'm giving it to. No uncertainty there, but there's a little bit of anxiety. Okay. You don't necessarily have fear. You can be uncertain without being anxious. Okay. Well, that's every kid on Christmas Eve, right? We know there's no fear there, right? It's when you combine the 2 that you get fear. And so what we're talking about, when we talk about the uncertainty, when I'm talking about mastering uncertainty, the uncertainty I talk about in the book is this uncertainty that results in fear. Okay. Because if you, for example, combine uncertainty with curiosity, you actually get excitement, right? So we don't have to, none of us worry about that level of uncertainty. That's again, the kid on Christmas Eve. We don't have to worry about that level. What we have to worry about is the one that creates fear. And the way we begin to mitigate that fear or even take it away is to buy down either one or both of those equations or those factors. We either buy down uncertainty or buy down anxiety or buy down both. And so what the book outlines, at least certainly the first part, is the neurology and the physiology of how you can buy down uncertainty, and then also how you can buy down anxiety. And we all have the same neurological and physiological tools, and we can get into those specifically when we want to. But that's the first portion of the book, is accessing the neurology and physiology that every single human being has. Every single one of us has the ability to do this. It's not limited to anybody. And so that first section says, hey, let's remember your abilities as a human. You're able to do this. The second section deals with those things that are unique about us that we bring into uncertainty. And that's when we get into objectives. In other words, what's the overall goal that is anchoring us? It goes into attributes, which is huge in terms of how we show up, because we just talked about how it's our most raw performance. And then, of course, identity. What identities are we bringing into the equation? Because that all drives us in a very unique way. So discovering that about ourselves allows us to now get even more of a picture of how and why we're going to perform the way we do. And then finally, the last portion allows gives some techniques and tools on how to do this in teams. How does a team translate this into a team performance, and getting into kind of the way teams are set up, both the way they are task organized, how important culture is, and also trust, which is important as well. So that's kind of the book in a nutshell, in terms of laying this out to give people the opportunity to start really practicing this. What I discovered is, and this is why I love neuroscience, is because neuroscience allows us to humanize all of these things. In other words, it takes the seals off the pedestal and it says seals are human, and there's human reasons why seals are able to do this. And now that I can explain them neurologically, I can articulate them to anybody. They can begin to practice them, and they can get really good at it, and they can start to teach others. And so that was the endeavor. That's always been the endeavor in any of the stuff I talk about, certainly with regard to my former life.
Couple comments. I loved it, dude. I could just see you and Huberman geeking out on this neuroscience, which I would have loved to have been in the room, because I would have been a lot
of flip charts. We were doing drawing on flip charts. So
yeah, I bet I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall there and in those conversations, and so it's super cool to hear. I guess what popped into my brain was, you talked about, people freezing. And then, I kind of went off in my brain a little bit, but, but you, in the beginning of the book, you talked about, panic and
Procrastination.
procrastination.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So panic and procrastination, which I thought were two things. And I just see, like, people who freeze and or do nothing. And I know personally, I know some personal friends that, fall into both of those categories. And I can't help but think, like, where, and then I've seen how often they make themselves feel wrong for either one of them.
Yeah. Whatever response. Yep.
The post afterwards going, oh my God, I can't believe that, and then they just kind of beat themselves up. I should have done more. I could have done more, or I could have acted faster, or whatever. So do you mind just addressing that, since we're just on the very beginning forefront of the book and having a conversation about the book, because I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty
100%.
powerful.
Yeah, to do so, we just have to a quick overview of our central nervous system, or our autonomic nervous system, which engages when we are in action. And what happens is, as we get stressed, as we start to feel stressed and anxious, our autonomic arousal goes up. Okay, as our autonomic arousal goes up in these environments, our amygdala, our threat detector, often gets tickled. And what's happening is we're starting to be presented with two choices. We all have heard those choices: fight or flight. Okay. Um, Now, those two choices are things we can execute on when we're still engaged in conscious thinking. And what I mean by that is, as autonomic arousal goes up and it raises, what's happening is our limbic brain, which is our emotional center, that's starting to take a forefront, start to move forward in our processing, and our frontal lobe, our conscious brain, is starting to take a backseat. Our frontal lobe and conscious brain is the brain that is the decision making brain. It's logical thought. Okay, and as that autonomic arousal rises up, that frontal lobe is starting to take a backseat to the limbic brain. What happens in the extreme cases, you have autonomic overload, or amygdala hijack. And this is when the frontal lobe has gone all the way back, and now we are fully limbic biased in our thinking. We are acting without thinking. Okay, this is where we get into panic and procrastination. We're either, and whatever those actions, whatever our body or whatever our brain is telling us to do, our limbic brain, because we don't have any control anymore, we're either panicking, freaking out, or whatever, or procrastinating or freezing. Now panic can look like both. It can look like frenetic action, frenetic energy. It can also look like passing out, or just freezing. But in any case, what's happening is we're acting without thinking. And so what we endeavor to do, and what the masters of uncertainty do, is we're constantly in any of these environments keeping our frontal lobe engaged, so that we're not letting that limbic brain take over, and we're in fact able to make conscious decisions and take conscious action in our environment. Because again, our decision in the moment, our conscious decision, might be to do nothing. It might be to freeze, because we might say, you know what, I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to gather more information. There's a really cool analogy that kind of comes from Vietnam. Back in Vietnam, the Viet Cong knew that the American patrols, on average, were fairly skittish, and so what they'd be in a jungle environment, and they basically just start firing their weapons, because they knew as soon as they did that, the American patrols would start firing back, even though they didn't know where they were. Okay, and as soon as the American patrols fired back, they knew the Viet Cong could pinpoint the American position. It's called recon by fire. Okay, that's what they used to do. And so the spec ops guys got there, and they realized, oh wait, we see what's happening here. And the spec op guys, of course, a little bit more calm, I guess, recognized that when they heard gunfire, the first thing they did was not shoot. The first thing they did was stop and wait and do nothing and figure out what was going on there. Now, again, if they have bullets whizzing by them, they're going to shoot, right? But their decision in that moment was, let's do nothing for a second. Okay, so don't confuse procrastination or even freeze with making a decision to do nothing. The key is decision, because procrastination, that freeze stuff, happens when we're not thinking. Okay, but when we're thinking, we can now have access to do whatever we want. So this whole project is to manage our autonomic arousal level, our anxiety. Okay, so that we can keep that frontal lobe engaged and begin to make conscious decisions. And there's many techniques you can do that. The ones I talk about in the book in terms of buying down that anxiety, we have visual tools, we have breath work, things you can do there to bring that autonomic arousal down, keep that frontal lobe engaged so that you can then start thinking through it. And you can, in fact, engage in the other aspect, which I know we'll talk about, which is buying down the uncertainty through the moving horizons processes.
So do you want to talk about the breathing and the visual stuff now, or do you want to?
Yeah, we can talk. Yeah. So, I mean, just to highlight, I give a lot of tools in the book. Let's highlight a couple though. The visual. So one of the things about our visual system, we know that when we get stressed and anxious, oh, by the way, let me just add one note because people really have to understand this. Anxiety is fiction. Okay. Anxiety is always in the future. And we know the past is history. The future is fiction. Stress is in the now because that's a physiological response. Anxiety is always a projection of what we think is going to happen and then worrying about it. And so it's always in the future. It's always fiction. One of the things you will never see Navy SEALs do is worry about stuff they can't control. All we worry about is what we can control in the moment. We don't worry about the future. Now, that does not preclude proper planning. Planning, you want to plan, okay, but you don't want to overplan. You don't want to be paralysis through analysis, okay. What we did was we always said, okay, as we look at the conduct of whatever operation we're on, there's a couple things during each phase that may likely happen just because we know it's just the nature of things. So we're flying in a helicopter, the helicopter might go down. Okay, so we're going to take a couple of those contingencies and plan out what we'll do if that happens. Okay, but after that, we're not going to worry about it. All right, we're going to deal with whatever happens when we're there. So we don't want to devalue proper planning. However, anxiety is I'm worried about something that hasn't occurred yet, and I'm creating a fiction around it, and that's affecting my physiology and my decision-making brain right now. So what we don't want to do that. We want to manage that. And so when we get anxious, when we get start to have that autonomic arousal go up, our visual system, for example, focuses. Our vision focuses in on the threat. That's what happens. Very natural response. One of the great techniques you can use is called open gaze. Open gaze or panoramic vision. This is simply where if you're looking straight ahead at something, you soften your gaze in a manner that you're not staring at anything anymore. You're taking it all in. If you were to put your arms out to your side, you could actually see the peripheries very easily. You're not focused in on anything. This has been proven definitively to bring down our autonomic arousal and calm us to a degree. Even when I started public speaking, which I never liked. Okay, I was always nervous when I started out. I'd get on stage, and instead of focusing in on something, I just look to the back of the room and just open my gaze. Just get that panoramic vision. It's also why horizons, whether we're sitting on a beach or looking at a mountainscape, calm us because we're automatically in open gaze. Versus walking in a tight city might make us a little bit more agitated. So panoramic vision is a tool that any of us can use anytime, and it brings down our autonomic arousal. Respiratory tools, there are several there. And the cool thing about respiratory system is you can actually use the respiratory system to manipulate your autonomic arousal in whatever direction you want to take it. If you want to calm down, you can breathe a certain way. If you want to stay steady, you can breathe in a certain way. If you want to increase your arousal, you can breathe in a certain way. The one I'll talk about in terms of calming down, because that's really what we're most interested in, is called the physiological sigh. The physiological sigh is a really simple tool that we've all actually done before, but it's where you take a full deep breath in all the way to the top. You top it off with a little more breath, and then you do a slow exhale down. So it'd be like nice slow exhale. You do that 4, 5, 6, even 10 times, and you will literally be calming down. Now, the reason why I said everybody's done it is because we all probably remember doing this and might notice ourselves doing it, for example, when we're trying to go to sleep. Okay, if any of us have pets like dogs do this all the time when they're laying down. You can hear them take a nice deep breath in, and it's a slow exhale. That's a physiological sigh. What that's doing is that it's blowing out carbon dioxide. The stress we feel is actually a buildup of CO2 versus a lack of oxygen. Is blowing out that carbon dioxide and bringing our autonomic arousal down, bringing that frontal lobe back online, the most important thing, so that we can begin making conscious decisions. And so those are two very powerful ones. Obviously, I give several ideas in the book, and I would encourage anybody to look up breathwork. There's so much cool science around breathwork now that people can really manipulate their bodies in myriad ways by just the way they breathe.
I think this is so important for people to take away, because it's instant, like it's instant. You can get these things instantly. So a couple of things that were in your book was one thing that when I read was I was blown away. 40% of your brain capacity is dedicated to visual.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah, like
That's
it's
true.
wild.
Yeah.
And so and what is it to respiratory? Because just curious.
Yeah, I'd have to consult the Hubermans on that one. I just know that what we have to know as lay people is that it's all tied into our central nervous system. Everything's tied together. Our visual and respiratory systems are all tied in. And that's why they're so important in this. One of the interesting factors of the visual system being such a predominant force for human beings is just the fact that when you lose vision, it's why the other senses really amp up, and you begin to really sense things in ways that you otherwise didn't, because your brain is now and has the capacity to now focus it.
It's able to move that 40% away from vision into the other senses.
Apply it to other things, to other senses. Yeah. So that's quite fascinating.
Well, I'm going to have to Google the whole respiratory thing, or we'll have to phone a friend. We'll call Andrew. but it's because I've been doing a lot of breath work in the last, say, 12 months. We're doing it with our mastermind group, and I would say pretty much all of us are doing it now, all 6 of us. My benefits from, weirdly enough, so I've just recently started doing this breathwork exercise while I'm in my cold plunge. And so staying in for double the length of time, and actually weirdly enough, and I don't know if you have a comment towards this, just sharing a story while we're talking here, but is that I've found with the breath work, now that I'm able to do the breath work, I used to get, so every minute I dunk down and hold my breath for as long as I can. Well, with the breath work, I can double the length of time that I've been able to hold my breath previously. And then what I thought was really weird was I don't get brain freeze. So I can stay, most of the time I would, I'd stay down and hold my breath, but I'm coming up because my brain's starting to hurt, right? Starting to get a headache, when you eat that cold ice cream. But now I don't get it. I never get it, actually. So I don't know what that has to do.
Well, I say this. So first of all, I love the ice bath. How cold is your ice bath?
We do anywhere from 50 to 52. It's set at set at 50 degrees.
Oh, nice. Okay, I have one in my garage. I keep mine at 33. It's not a competition, but just so you know.
Well, we used to do 33, and then I started reading some articles that said 2 things. One, women have a different capacity.
They do, yeah.
So that's, I shouldn't say women, but people have a different capacity.
Different people, yes,
different people. But there is a trend where women, too much is
bad.
Too much,
yes,
right?
Yeah,
so it's you can jump in there and stay in and force yourself for 4 or 5 minutes at 33 degrees. But is it when have you?
And I will say just to make to even the playing field here, the science says that anything around 40 degrees, 41 degrees for 3 minutes is all you need. And so anything below 41 degrees, I don't stay in for longer than 3 minutes because I don't need to. The benefits don't increase almost at all past 3 minutes. And so mine being cold allows me to just do 3 minutes and I'm done, right? Whereas if it's up in the 45, 50, you're going to want to say 5 minutes or 6 minutes or something like that. So it's really all personal preference. But I will say that you bring up the cold plunge, and I think it's great that you do. I'm going to move into what this moving horizons technique is in a moment here, because this is it's a really great way to practice moving horizons. From a respiratory side, I just want to issue one warning, one caution here, and that's because when we hold our breath, okay, we are the urgency we feel to breathe is not because of a lack of oxygen. It's because of a buildup of CO2. Okay, this is this means that when you really feel like taking a breath, that urgency, that kind of panic, if you push through that, you actually can access different stores of oxygen in your body and hold your breath for longer. Okay, the reason why I issue a warning on this is because that warning sign, that warning that your body is giving you, only comes once. And if you push past it, you're not going to get another warning. In other words, as soon as you're out of oxygen, you'll pass out. Okay, this is why free divers sometimes just in the middle of their dive, they pass out. We've had SEALs who, and unfortunately, like idiots, they were practicing breath holds on the weekends in the pool. They weren't spotting each other. They go down, they both push past that thing, and they die. They drown right there in the pool. And so we find them Monday morning. Okay, so it's very dangerous. I don't want people to go try Yeah, and one of the breathing techniques you're talking about, the Wim Hof breathing, for example, is breathing that actually increases your autonomic arousal. It gets you heated up, gets you warm. It's very effective in these environments. But this oxygen saturation and the ability to kind of hold your breath longer, while great, you don't want to push past that discomfort, because if you push past that discomfort, which you'll be able to, you don't get another warning. Okay, so just be careful when doing this. All of our listeners and you, be careful when doing this. Listen to your body. You can increase that time frame before you start to feel that discomfort for sure, which you've now experienced. You can train yourself to hold your breath longer, which is great. Just listen to your body that way.
Yeah, and I always do my cold plunge with Tennille, so I never. Which actually, I don't know if that's actually going to help me, because she'd just be like, "There's some." Well,
she pulls you out. If you pass out underwater, yeah. If she does, sorry, yeah.
Like, there's probably times she feels like not doing that.
That's right, as we all do, right? So yeah. Yeah, so that's the respiratory side. Let me, if I could, get into the moving horizons concept, because one of the things Huberman and I did discover was that the cold plunge is actually one of the best ways to practice moving horizons, and it's actually something you described. All right, moving horizons. So we talked about buying down anxiety. Okay, that's one factor that's one of the fear equations, or factors in the equation. Now let's talk about buying down uncertainty. Okay, buying down uncertainty we do through a process called moving horizons, which I talk about in the book.
Hey everyone, thanks very much for listening to that conversation with Rich Diviney. He's such a dear friend of mine. I love that guy. He's so smart. Can't encourage you enough to go out and buy this book. Like I said in the podcast, my management team, leadership team is going to be getting a copy. And so tune in next week for the second conversation that we have, the ongoing conversation from this one, where we dive more into the book, more into things that are going to help you guys transition in this certainty realm. And then we talk extensively about how to envelop this with your team and build in that process. So it's hugely, hugely valuable. It's a masterclass, honestly. So take a listen next week. Thanks very much for listening. Don't forget to share, do all the things you're supposed to do. Subscribe to help us continue to keep this thing without advertising. Have an awesome day, guys. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you being with us. If you found value in the show and know a friend or coworker who could benefit from this conversation, please share the link via text or on social media. Remember, each share creates a ripple effect of knowledge and inspiration. And if this podcast has supported you in any way, please support us by clicking the follow or subscribe button. It helps us to improve the delivery of top quality content moving forward.
The views, information, or opinions expressed by guests during the Dwayne Kerrigan Podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Dwayne Kerrigan and his affiliates. Dwayne Kerrigan or the Dwayne Kerrigan Podcast is not responsible for and does not verify the accuracy of any of the information contained in the podcast series. The primary purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. Listeners are advised to consult with a qualified professional or specialist before making any decisions based on the content of this podcast.